Okay, so this is part 2 of Libya Conflict Analysis, updated to 11th of August. The downfall of Muammar Gaddafi, or the Obama NATO bombing abomination. Try saying that 3 times fast. Okay, I'm going to make this a little easier to read, if you don't mind. And I will just briefly here insert it on another slide and make the font big. I beg your pardon for brief technical realignments here. Okay, that'll have to do. So we were at the chronology, and we will start the slideshow from here. So on February 16th, just prior to the rebellion, a large Islamist prisoner group was released, the largest in memory, by the intercession of Saif al-Islam al-Gaddafi, the most prominent politically of Gaddafi's sons. These were probably largely from Syria and Iraq, where a very conservative form of Islam, similar to the Wahhabi of Saudi Arabia's practice, called Salafism, which I think originates in Egypt. And there is jihadism popular in the area. They had the huge contribution to the Afghan and Iraqi freedom fighters of Islam. So then the spring outbreak occurred. There was an attack on the Benghazi barracks where they removed weaponry. About 100 to 200 protesters were killed in each city. Tripoli is a city of almost 2 million. That's what we can establish. I could be wrong. That is, I have 2 or 3 data points on this, though. In other words, I believe one of the human rights group estimated this and so forth. And I do have references on my website for these PowerPoints that actually have embedded hyperlinks to the news stories. So within 48 hours and latest 1 week from protests, they went on all of these charges, heavy weapon use, which Amnesty International has since come out and said there's no evidence for, mercenaries and atrocities. Again, no evidence. Soldiers with Viagra to rape, no evidence. This lady, Obeidi, who got claims that she got raped and burst in, she was actually kicked out or ran away from, well, actually, let me get it straight. She said she didn't want to be used, and she felt used by the rebels. She went to Qatar, and the Qataris beat her for basically saying that. That's why they beat her, and it isn't reported, and it's a fact that she said that she didn't like being used by the rebels. That's a fact. Now, once the Libyan loyalist state nearly crushes rebellion at Benghazi, there is a UN resolution freezing assets, calling for an immediate ceasefire, this is largely authored by the U.S. Immediate ceasefire, the freeze of funds has to run through the Libya Sanctions Council. They've ignored all of this. All these restrictions were ignored. Every single one of them, they've been the #1 inflictor of civilian casualties. The rebels have been harsher, and the renegades have been harsher than the government troops. With that said, these are all documented facts, and I challenge anyone who disagrees with me to post their own video or post some bloody references instead of just telling me that I'm full of it. I get a few people who criticize my presentations, and they're never specific with references. This whole thing culminates, in my view, as NATO bombs Libyan television, killing and wounding 20 journalists to protect civilians from Gaddafi's, quote, murderous rhetoric. Then I found out that there is a charter for CyberCom to suppress propaganda. Interesting fact, April, an Al-Qaeda operative in Libya, I kid you not, declared the Emirate of, I believe, Derha, which is the ultimate militant city in Libya. And this is where Saif al-Islam, who claimed he was in touch with them, said he was going to give them their Mecca. So they basically have unrestrained control of it if they helped him crush the rebellion. But the Libyan government, for the first time in memorable history, rejected this embrace of their traditional foes because they're socialists and the fanatics hate them. And Gaddafi was hell on wheels, according to the against jihadism and Al-Qaeda, according to the CIA guy who ran the Get Bin Laden program up to 2005. I think he's on the news all the time. And somewhere near May, Gadafi begins handing out kalishnikovs, supposedly over 1 million served. June 26, Amnesty International finds that there's no evidence to support any of the atrocity allegations against it, and the rebels have been rougher. Pro-West countries continue to harden, recognizing the rebels, turning over embassies, handing over money. And Gaddafi and the Sitting Loyalist Government, while South Africa, Kenya, Brazil, many Latin American countries such as Ecuador, Peru, Bolivia, certainly Brazil, South Africa, Zimbabwe, of course, North Korea, Iran, and many in the Arab world are horrified by this type of a terror bombing campaign, which is killing civilians. It's just unbelievable because they could sit down at the table at any time. But what happened is that after they got you in 1973, all the agencies in the government that wanted to go further than that knew they had a green light because it says by any means necessary. So the primary impetus was probably quasi-humanitarian by Clinton going to Obama, but it was exploited by every spook and creep in the military-industrial complex, as far as I can figure, starting with pulling the CIA playbook, you know, because these rumors couldn't come out before the rebellion. So they had their playbook and they executed it. And I've heard with Israeli collaboration, but, and again, Judaism has nothing to do with Israel for me. They're two separate issues, the religion and the state. Establish a more strictly Muslim and less socialist way of life. Al-Qaeda agrees with NATO and likes NATO bombing because it makes more people radicalized. Plus, it makes the country more destabilized so that they can win. And they want a more strictly Muslim and less socialist way of life. And Cyrenaians are much more racist latently. Under socialism, even the people that tend to be racist, like against the Jews or against gypsies, it tends to get driven underground under socialism because it's a strict state that's supposed to have universal suffrage. Women will suffer also. So charges are filed against NATO in Belgium just recently, around the 1st of August, by the lady, one of the wives of the and mothers of a bunch of it was one of the original coup guys, his grandkids who were killed in a bombing, and part of his family sued in Belgium. NATO's immune, but not through the courts in Belgium. It's the only way to do it. So this is good because I view that NATO should either be a peacekeeper or a belligerent, but not both. Yunus is assassinated. The other general competing with him lived near Langley, Virginia since the 80s, and he quit when he was in charge of the one invasion Gaddafi's done, which was into Chad in the late 80s. Rebel factions start to split because the Obeidi tribe of... Okay, now I'll get you a map, okay? All right. So I think that's a good enough map for now. And let's go to... Okay, so this isn't a perfect map, but these are various tribes of Libya. Now, this one should be a bit better. Yes, so in this one, what we've got here is, this is Cyrenaica. Here's Darna. This is a seat of potentially radical Islam with a major Al-Qaeda representative basically running the place. And this is documented in a lot of sources. Tobruk, this is where the Obeidi tribe comes from. I think it even says something like, I don't know if that says Al-Bandi or whatever. Now these mountains over in orange over Tripolitania, where it says Jabal Nafusa, this is the Berber area. And the Berbers are semi-independent from the rebels. They want autonomy. So this is a card that the regime could play, as they call it, the regime, the Libyan Sitting Loyalist Government. This area in the center, which is yellow, Sirte, That is the traditional home of the Gaddafi tribe. The Bani Walid place is also the name of a tribe. Zintan is the name of a tribe, and I believe they're highly loyal to Gaddafi. Zawiya was highly loyal to Gaddafi. Misrata is totally opposed to Gaddafi. So, forgive me for going to all that, but the Obeidis were the family of Yunus. And if you look on the far right near the Egyptian border of the coast, you see Tobruk or Tobruk. And that is a big problem for the rebels to have an unstable flank. And the son of Yunus was so upset at the funeral that he said, I wish we had Gaddafi back, which is a very dangerous thing to say, but because of his grief, they didn't go after him, which I will give them high marks for. Since I don't usually reference rebels too much, because to me this is about the West's lack of ethics, but we still need the timeline. I will mention them when it's called for. So, Yunus assassinated. Now, these factors all accumulating. Oh, and then it hardens into different minds. The Berbers don't recognize Benghazi. They fire the council. The reformists and Islamists have more attention. Certain tribal lines line up. There's a lot of evidence that there are cleansing teams in rebel areas that are killing loyalists. All of this business about loyalist atrocities is, I swear to God, based on reading through all the news and double referencing, it's going the other way. And so the assumption is there are atrocities, that he has no support, that he was a bad leader, that they use rape, mercenaries, women's freedom is not at serious risk because they're reformers, they're Democrats. In a few weeks, this will be over. We'll get business for doing this. We can act with impunity. We can interpret reality any way we see fit, regardless of the truth. Now, if legal proceedings were established in absentia, such as Pinochet being tried in Spain, and any country could start this trend, where they try them in absentia and they convict them of the fraud, of betrayal of fiduciary trust, not using the sanctions committee to do the money stuff, and committing mass acts of murder and mayhem and state terrorism. They could be tried and have arrest warrants issued. We shouldn't tolerate this. And I'm sure the ancestors we have in the Revolutionary War of 1775 and onwards would agree with me. All NATO leadership and the Obama, Cameron, Sarkozy, General Rasmussen leadership would be guilty of all of these things. And we've had severe failure of our media. Virtually zero coverage on main networks and MSNBC, even The Daily Show, virtually no mention of it, Colbert Report, very little discussion of it on PBS, and no background that any high school student could do showing those human development indexes. And there's a story behind those human development indexes that isn't just flat, those indexes, and I haven't gotten into this story yet. Now, the Telegraph editor, okay, Guardian sold out, New York Times sold out. They covered a lot with really one-sided journalism. It's quite surprising because the Guardian doesn't have commercial pressure because it's living off of a huge endowment. Telegraph editor, I think his name is Pradeep something, but this dude blew me away. And so I'll be featuring a segment summarizing his arguments. That's my value to you. I'm summarizing massive amounts of research. CNN bucks a trend with McKenzie and Watson bringing reports of large crowds and lots of pro-Gaddafi people, and they can warn you that there's some real support. And that's the point of this presentation, is to discuss the support. So I'll let you read